My name is Eleanor Vance, and 6 months ago, I was brutally humiliated by a man who mistook his position for power. But that was then. 3 weeks ago, standing on the stage of our annual shareholder meeting, I listened patiently as that same man, Marcus Thorne, the company's chief executive officer, begged the board for a vote of confidence. When he finished, he looked directly at me, the new majority shareholder he did not know existed, and I gave him the answer he deserved. His world collapsed in a silent professional instant, ending a cruel saga that began on a mundane Tuesday afternoon. It all started so promisingly. For 5 years, I was the head of strategy at one of the nation's fastest-growing fintech firms. It was a role that demanded precision, foresight, and relentless dedication, all qualities I prided myself on possessing. My days were a calibrated mix of high-stakes negotiations and meticulous financial modeling. I lived in a contemporary high-rise apartment overlooking the financial district, a subtle symbol of the life I had built entirely through my own capability. My professional existence was elegant, ambitious, and deeply gratifying. I wasn't just working, I was shaping the future of the company. The company's success, however, had blinded its leader. Marcus Thorne had been appointed CEO 2 years prior, more for his network and superficial charm than for any actual business acumen. He was a creature of excessive confidence who saw the hard work of his executives, especially the women, as simply the natural backdrop for his own brilliance. He loved public spectacle and grand gestures, viewing strategy as a performative art rather than a technical necessity. While I was focused on mitigating future risk and securing long-term capital, Marcus was focused on the size of his year-end bonus and the placement of his name in industry publications. The air in the executive suite began to feel thin and entitled, but I kept my head down, believing competence would always trump ego. I was wrong. The world I had built was about to be shattered not by market forces, but by petty, calculated cruelty. The crisis came not with a bang, but with a digital chime. It was a mandatory Zoom meeting titled Urgent Mid-Quarter Realignment. 70 executives and senior managers were required to attend, all dressed in corporate armor, sitting in their respective home offices. Marcus, positioned dramatically in front of a lavish, custom-built display of stock tickers, opened by announcing a necessary budgetary pruning to safeguard his personal bonus metrics. He scrolled through the list, firing 24 people in quick succession, his tone devoid of empathy. When he reached my name, he paused, a slight, smug smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. He didn't just fire me. He used it as an opportunity for theatrical belittlement in front of the entire management tier. He told the assembled group that while I was talented, I was ultimately a commodity, not a visionary. He asserted, loudly enough for the entire roster of faces to hear, that I lacked the killer instinct required to reach the very top. He insisted that I would always be an implementer, never an owner. The camera focused on his face, radiating false benevolence as he said I would be better served focusing on less demanding pursuits. He waited for a reaction. I offered him nothing. I simply met his gaze, paused for a beat longer than necessary, and then, with zero emotion, I muted my microphone, clicked the Leave Meeting button, and watched the corporate world vanish from my screen. The sting wasn't the loss of income. My severance package was generous. It was the profound, calculated public humiliation. To be dismissed as lacking the very essence of ambition, especially by a man I knew was failing, was an insult that transcended finance. It settled deep into my chest, a cold weight of absolute resolve. Have you ever been humiliated like this in front of your colleagues, where you couldn't defend yourself? Tell me in the comments, because that specific feeling of injustice is a powerful, silent fuel. The immediate aftermath was disorienting. I spent 2 days in silent contemplation, analyzing the situation not as a victim, but as a strategist who had encountered an unexpected aggressive attack. I knew Marcus's assessment was projection. He was the one focused on short-term gains, while I was built for the long game. My first call was not to an executive headhunter, but to my financial fiduciary. My family had established a trust fund decades ago, a substantial capital reserve that I had always treated as an emergency buffer, choosing instead to build my career without accessing it. Until now, I had seen it only as a safety net. Now I saw it as a weapon, My fiduciary, an older man named Mr. Harrington, patiently explained the scope of the fund. It was significantly larger than I had ever allowed myself to consider, structured to be highly liquid and strategically anonymous. The realization that I commanded this much capital, waiting for a purpose, shifted my entire perspective. My initial setbacks were minor. A lawyer specializing in corporate structuring initially questioned my resolve, suggesting I should just take a few months off. I dismissed him immediately and found a firm specializing in hostile, silent acquisitions. Their first recommendation was the immediate creation of 2 shell holding companies, established in different jurisdictions and funded via staggered transfers that were complex enough to obscure the ultimate beneficiary. This initial structural move cost me a small fortune, but it was essential. It was the first step on the path from victim to predator, and the momentum felt exhilarating. I spent the next weeks mastering the language of proxy voting, SEC filing thresholds, and shareholder rights.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Turn on bell notification to stay updated for more revenge stories.
My self-doubt vanished, replaced by the discipline of the chase. I wasn't looking for a new job. I was building a new office, one where Marcus would be permanently absent. The true turning point arrived when I dove into the company's internal metrics. The data I knew Marcus always skimmed. He was making reckless, short-sighted decisions, prioritizing quarterly stock bumps over long-term stability, exactly the behavior I had warned him against. The stock was stagnant, undervalued, and ripe for takeover, yet no single entity had amassed enough power to challenge him. The shareholders were a fractured, tired collective. I realized my opportunity wasn't just to save my own reputation. It was to save the firm I had helped build. And the only way to do that was to become the ultimate authority. I was the strategic insight the company desperately needed, and now I had the capital to enforce that vision. I secured a major block of shares from a retiring institutional investor who was quietly disillusioned with Marcus's leadership. That single transaction took me from zero to a significant, though still silent, minority holder. I was in the game, and Marcus had no idea he was the target. Confidence wasn't something I lacked. It was something I was now poised to purchase. The plan moved into systematic, quiet execution over the next 6 months. Working out of a private office suite, I directed my legal team to acquire shares relentlessly through my 2 shell entities, carefully ensuring each purchase remained just below the regulatory reporting thresholds that would trigger public scrutiny. I had established a sophisticated, multi-layered veil of anonymity. Every time Marcus publicly announced another short-term gain that masked a long-term liability, the stock would briefly spike and then settle, allowing me to acquire more at an attractive price. I was tracking his errors like a market analyst studying a faulty algorithm. The closer the annual shareholder meeting approached, the more aggressively I bought, utilizing the full liquidity of the trust. By the final week, I had calculated the exact number of shares required to pass the 51% majority threshold. It was a precise, calculated risk, and I executed the final purchase just 48 hours before the meeting, ensuring the paperwork would be formally filed and recognized, but not publicly disseminated until the moment I chose. The control I now held was immense, silent, and absolute. The annual shareholder meeting was held in the company's grand ballroom, a familiar setting for corporate spectacle. Marcus naturally was in peak form, delivering a bombastic presentation about the year's achievements, largely ignoring the critical debt structure I knew was crumbling beneath his feet. The room was packed with institutional investors, board members, and senior staff, many of whom had witnessed my humiliation 6 months earlier. Marcus wrapped up his speech with a flourish, then turned to the assembled board and said, "I now call for a formal vote of confidence from the board and the shareholders present, confirming our leadership for the next fiscal year." The motion was seconded, and he smiled, waiting for the formality of the vote. This was my moment. As the proceedings prepared to begin, the large double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. I walked in, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, powerful, understated, and completely composed. Every head in the room turned. Marcus's face, initially a mask of benign confusion, cycled through recognition, disbelief, and finally, panic. I did not raise my voice, nor did I offer a dramatic greeting. I walked directly to the front, stepped up to the microphone, and activated it. The sound of my voice, steady and calm, cut through the tension. "I wish to raise a motion," I stated simply. The chairman, stunned, could only nod. I looked directly at Marcus Thorne, whose eyes were wide with dawning corporate dread. As the legal representative of the majority shareholder, controlling 51.3% of the outstanding shares, I announced, the number resonating like a gong in the sudden silence, I motioned for the immediate termination of the current chief executive officer, Marcus Thorne, for gross corporate incompetence and malfeasance. I offered no explanation, no bitter words, only the cold, corporate reality. Marcus attempted to speak, stammering about budget cuts and killer instinct, but the words died in his throat. The company's lead counsel, whom I had already alerted via my legal team, stepped forward, confirming the validity of my claim and motion. The board's shock gave way to swift, pragmatic compliance. Within 90 seconds, the motion was passed, and Marcus Thorne was being quietly, professionally escorted out of the room by the head of security, his arrogance finally and completely shattered. My victory was not loud, it was simply fact. The feeling of finally resting in a position of true control is unlike any peace I've ever known. I didn't fire Marcus out of rage. I terminated him as a necessary strategic asset correction. Today, I sit in my new corner office, the one I inherited not through politics, but through superior financial execution. The company is now stabilized, operating with the long-term vision it once lacked. I look back on that humiliating Zoom call, not with pain, but with gratitude. Marcus's cruelty handed me the key to the very kingdom he was trying to keep me out of. He dismissed me as lacking instinct, but true instinct knows when to be quiet, when to observe, and when to spend a lifetime of savings to restore balance. The sweet, elegant truth is that dignity, when backed by capital and strategy, is the ultimate form of power. My goal was never revenge, it was restoration. And with that restoration came a profound, quiet peace. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to enjoy more revenge and inspiring stories like this one. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and tell us what you think about this story.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Turn on bell notification to stay updated for more revenge stories.